Hey everyone, this is Rangadad. Not financial advice, just the way I'm looking at the market. Rainy Saturday morning here in Australia. Um, just a quick one today. Try and unpack a little bit what happened overnight and where to next. Kind of a funny one, really. The market's pretty thin at the moment and pretty spooked by what could happen with the election. Looks like we obviously attacked some liquidity to the upside and pulled right back down into this nice big order here. So fuck that guy. There is a fair chunk of liquidity to the upside, but one thing to sort of keep in mind, we have flipped the daily, so there is now more liquidations to the upside on the daily. That hasn't necessarily been the case the last few days, while we've been seeing the downside, and the 7 days actually evened out, which again wasn't the case. There was a lot more to the downside. Now, actually, I'll do it on this. So it looks like it's the same on all exchanges. The 30 days is the one that kind of is a little concerning, I guess. There is a lot down here. To even it out, you'd have to come back into probably about 65, roughly. Probably a little bit less. That 64,400 would definitely even it out. But you are going to get more come into the market as well if we get down to that point. So, look, there is still the potential. One thing with trading at all, and it took me ages to try and realize, is you got to be able to hold two ideas in your head at the same time, and the potential for both of them to be accurate. So, look, that's always on the cards. The longs that I've got open at the moment, I've hedged them such that my liquidation point is, I think, less than 63K. Little bit risky there, but at the same time, if it goes down past that, then we're going way down, and I'll be closing out the longs before we got to that point. But I would keep that hedge open, obviously, if we just flush. So, and I would expect like 61.5 is obviously the target that I've had for a few weeks now. I think it's weeks anyway. They all kind of blend in together. But yeah, 61.5 is still a spot with a lot of liquidations. So that level there is still kind of a little bit of a concern, $4.6 billion. But, you know, it's a long way from here. And just think about how sick Bitcoin's going to look if we're getting to that point there, which could be what the market wants to freak people out. That's kind of why you got to be able to hold a few ideas in your head at any one time. The big thing, though, is when you look at the yearly, it is still, like, we've had a lot of shorts come into the market here. $16 billion worth of shorts liquidations at 74K now. That's a lot. Interesting how that shows up as 11 billion now at 61.5. I don't necessarily trust the dollar values of these. It's probably more accurate when you're looking at CoinAnk. So when you take different levels in CoinAnk, these sort of liquidation levels here that are more real time are probably the more important ones. I haven't looked at it enough to get an idea of whether this is tracking people that close out those positions or not, or if it just holds on those positions all the way through. So that's it's just handy because it highlights where the key levels are. So it wants to go where the money is. Yeah, it looks like we've done a reasonable job here. 67,900 is actually potential level. Go out a little bit to find it, but down into here wouldn't really surprise me on a flush. There were a few other things that I was looking at which would bring that into play. For the time being, it's still like there were some people taking profit on this little pump. So open interest was dropping as this thing was getting close to the top. That's a little concerning. But in general, like open interest has been climbing and hasn't really had a major correction since the bottom here. And generally, as open interest is increasing, price is going to increase at the moment. You'd have to get a fair bit of force in the market, someone really wanting to really push prices down for it to flush and get rid of a lot of these open interest positions. So a little bit of a bottoming signal here. It's not most like the strongest signal, especially on the perps. It's just you'd prefer to see sort of a lot more red over a longer period here. The fact that it's on the perps, it's not as high on this bottom here as it was here, suggests that it might be petering out, like it might actually be basing around here. There is a fair few orders below us down into that low 68. And this spot order here, the yellow one, at 68 has been in there for quite a while. So, it is 67,800 is where the cursor's at the moment. It's pretty thin below that. So it's still a potential to get down there. Now, I've taken a few profits on the hedge already just this morning, and I've opened it back up again on this little increase, but my stop loss is in profit for that hedge now, because if it hits that, then it's probably going to be going back up a little bit. And I'll see what happens around the 200 EMA, and go from there. So what I was looking at yesterday after the live, this is a 13 EMA on the daily. It's been an interesting level. Like it's held up a lot of the closes and opens, and we tend to mainly get wicks through it when we're having a decent run up. So that's why I switched it from the 20, because the 20 sort of lags underneath it for these pumps, whereas the 13 seems to pick up good position for a pump, okay, for a bounce. So just so you know, that's why it may look a little bit different to yesterday, but everything else is pretty well the same. So the 67 flush would get us quite close to this value area high. So even wicks down into 67,200 wouldn't be massively detrimental, and it wouldn't surprise me if we hit that. Um, I watched a video from the Trading Parrot last night. Um, does a lot of different analysis, but one thing I noticed was that his volume profile, he uses the 70% bands, and it just smashed straight through them. So the 40% bands on the volume profile, that there, seems to be more important for Bitcoin. Like, it's been a pretty critical level for us for months now, actually. The amount of times we see it bounce off that, even during like intraday trading sessions, is quite impressive. So closures below the 13 EMA aren't the end of the world, but to be honest, you'd kind of like to see it closing above there still. Concerns me a little bit. We haven't dropped BBWP too much, and we are breaking below that bullish control zone. That is definitely concerning, and there is bearish divergence on momentum at the moment. So looking at just that alone, you could actually say there is an argument for 64.4 to come back into this level here. So that's why at the moment my liquidation level is well below 64. It's actually below that EMA there. Which kind of we're getting into, might actually move it so that it's a bit below that high volume level. But that is definitely a target, so not going to say it's not, but at the moment we've still got quite high ETF flows. So it hasn't really slowed down too much in terms of bybit, which is the BlackRock one, I believe. The fact that there's still money coming into that, do it in US dollars, like 320 million is nothing to sneeze at. People were rejoicing about that coming into it at the start. But the fact there is this much coming in, nearly 22 billion just in, what's that? What the freak is that? The dates are different between the start and the finish date. That one goes days and months, and that one goes months and days. What the frick? Can't decide whether it's American or the rest of the world. Anyway, so yeah, massive inflows still. That's got to hold price at some sort of level. Doesn't have to, but the money flows are the things you've really got to watch during this sort of volatility during the election. But I think everyone's really positioning for what's going to happen after the election. There isn't a huge amount of volume being traded on NASDAQ unless that changed overnight. Big flush yesterday, but even then, for a flush, it wasn't as high as these sort of ones. So interesting recovery of the vector candle here. That's not a bad play if you're day trading NASDAQ, to just know where your vectors are. Because if you see the price moving in that direction, it gives you a pretty good take profit position level. So we could still have a little bit more downside to come here over the next few days next week until we get some sort of certainty from the election. Yeah, we're still expecting a little bit of downside. Same with S&P 500, same sort of shit. Recovered the vector, probably head down early next week, just a little bit more. This one's a little bit more extended to the downside so far. Funny thing is, in bounces, Nasdaq normally leads the way. It didn't necessarily in this bounce here, but when you get big drops, like really big corrections, just watch for the Nasdaq. It may show the way. So equal weight is down almost at the lows, but equal weight recovered the full height of that vector. So IWM, interesting sort of inside day there. Nothing really to write home about again, just tidying up vector candles, which generally when you see that, you can quite often get more downside because it's just the market's coming up, taking the liquidity before it heads back down again. So ISM manufacturing was down. That's probably spooked the market a little bit, which did come out after the unemployment rate. Non-farm payrolls was interesting. Can't really take this into consideration too much, but I think honestly the number that moved the market's probably this. Anything below 50 is the economy's in contraction generally. So the fact that this surprised to the downside is probably why we had the pullback mid-session. Interesting, IWM's kind of recovered that though too. What time was that? Yeah, 1:30. But actually, a lot of volatility around that number. Pumped up a little bit, tapped the 800 EMA on the 15-minute, and then pulled back. Just have a quick look at the ES. We did the same thing. Yeah. Bit of volatility, and then pull back. Interesting, I didn't pull back and break to a new low here. I still think it will, though. The fact that it recovered the majority of these vectors in here suggests it'll probably go lower. And it recovered these vectors with that little pump there. So still leaving a few behind. So yeah, there'll be targets in the future, but for the time being, it's probably trending down a little bit longer yet. XLI, yeah. Actually, sorry, go back to this. Still trending down. Momentum's getting pretty oversold though. It can stay there for a while though, as we know. XLY, XLP, let's do equal weight. So equal weight is down a little. Sort of some topping signals there. We have had a cross of stochastic momentum. So suggesting potential more downside. The fact that this is still high, again, it just means don't need to be as concerned about the economy at this stage. But yeah, this is obviously getting a weird read because of Amazon and Tesla. So this is one I'm going to be paying a little bit more attention to going forward. KRE pulling back a little bit. I think really if you're worried about the economy and stuff, I think this breaking and retesting and then falling away from this trend line is probably the signal that, okay, there's something else going on here. It doesn't look like that's happening yet. There's still a fair bit of support for it. But any sort of bad news will rip KRE apart, I think. So ITB home builders is sort of still ticking up. Momentum is still actually to the upside, funnily enough. But it's not looking super. Interesting if it comes all the way back into 103. So that one. DJI Gold had a little bounce. Again, suggesting we're maybe finding a bottom soon. Closed the gap though and rejected off that 13 EMA. So not exactly out of the woods yet on that, but too bad. Big small pullback. Could still bounce from there a little bit. I kind of expect to be honest. Transportation's another one to watch. I'd actually do BJT divided by gold. That's interesting. That got ripped. Might keep that on there. Might be the opposite to this one. So basically, when gold's going up and DJT is going down, DJT is the transport sector, so it's suggesting not as many people like the economy is not as strong because they're not needing as much transport. And then obviously gold's going up at the same time, so people are hedging it. This is an interesting one to keep on the chart, I think. It was pulling back pretty hard a few days ago, 30th, so it did sort of preempt the more major pullback on the S&P. So it dropped hard on this candle, which looking at the S&P you wouldn't really be too worried about, but then obviously you got that flush the next day. So what you're kind of looking for is early indicators. It's not a super early one, but it's not too bad. Skew did pull back a little bit yesterday. Nothing major though, no sort of major flush. Yeah, maybe a little bit of support in there. No real read off it. Interesting what read it gives today. HSI. So Hong Kong market got a little bit of support yesterday. Oh, actually, the other thing, sorry. Interestingly, this market, the advanced decline line has dipped below the medium moving average, which here is 50. So I got a 10, a 50, and a 200. It looks like the 10 may have just crossed the 50 as well. So not super healthy. The pullback wasn't as quick as this one. So it might lead to a bit of sideways, but probably going to lead a couple more days of down, I think, next week. Pull back into the election and then a pump after it would not be too surprising at this stage. Japanese market took the vector candle. Yeah, Chinese market had a little bit of a green day, but nothing. Again, still in this range. Kind of want to see a breakout either way of that particular range. TLTs, whoa, still having a bad day, which is probably because yields are going up. because, yeah, they're not expecting the Fed to cut rates as quick, basically. So probably getting close to a reasonable time to buy some more. The high yield junk. This is actually suggesting that the bonds market does not like what's going on. But LQD IF is an interesting signal. Yeah, I mean that pullback there is kind of a flag that we were going to be going down soon on the rest of the market. So I'm going to keep an eye on this one as well. It's not looking super healthy, but it's not as bad as what high yield junk is signaling. So a little bit scary there on high yield junk. Kind of want to see a turnaround in this over the next few days. Like if the market keeps flushing a little bit, you want to see this slowing down and potentially starting to move back up to the upside. Copper's still in the range. Geez, it's going to be a good breakout when it happens. Uranium's back down into the bottoms as well, so that was a nice little news pump. Then come straight back down. Wiped out a lot of retail that jumped on it. So gold's kind of recovered this vector and kept pulling back. So gold may see a little bit more downside. Certainly wouldn't be expecting to come much lower than there. And to be honest with you, that's probably going to be a support level in there. So somewhere in here, you'd expect gold to come back into 50 EMA will probably come up into that area as well, which has been respected along the way. Silver, recovered this vector. Yeah, look, silver's a pain in the ass at the moment. It's a long-term hold, but pull back into support anyway, or nearly. A couple more days, down days, and chop for silver. It's a very choppy chart, silver. Oil, bit of a pullback as well. Can't have high oil for the election, so expect oil to probably chop around in this area for a little bit. I think tensions in the Middle East are still a concern for it. Don't think it's a massive deal at the moment, but market might. US dollar has pumped again. Could bounce off that 13 EMA there. Yeah. Until we break this range. Like if we do break this range, that's actually that's potentially going to see at least a 105.3 on the Dixie, which would probably suppress most stocks and crypto for a little bit longer. Although crypto could still break out just because the amount of dollars that's been flowing into it. Aussie's flat, Japanese is flat, pulling back pretty hard actually. But Euro pulling back, so that 200 was a bit of resistance. Might just be a little bounce, getting ready to push back up. This is actually on shorter time frames, like an hourly or a 4-hourly. This is a pretty decent W pattern. So that's not a bad sort of pattern in there. It's pulling back into that high, and then potentially will break to the upside However, if Dixie does push 105, then this is probably coming back into these levels here. That vector on the daily. Pulling back pretty hard at the moment. Great Britain down. Yeah. When's the okay. Same day. So I think the market might actually be pricing in a hold on the interest rates for the time being. That's certainly the forecast last week or even a couple of days ago, but I don't know. See, seems the pullback in everything and the pump in the US dollar and the pump in yields suggests that the market's pricing in a higher interest rate for longer. Interesting pullback on Tesla. Probably needs to find some support around the 245 level, but it may not. Momentum's only just rolling over now. Nvidia finding some support off this trend line, so that's not a bad thing, but do expect it to break below that coming into earnings. Definitely next couple of weeks are going to be potentially choppy, a bit of money moving around the place. Actually, I wouldn't expect Google to come much lower than sort of 166. Expect some support for Google around 166, 167. Going to put a little box around that. Oops. That's sort of a target area, I reckon. Google. Apple. Pull back, found a bit of support there. Obviously, that's a target if we pull back harder, but even now it's probably 200 EMA you would hope would hold it up a little bit. But that would be a lower low too. There's no real massive divergences here yet. If we turn around here, there would be a little bit of a hidden divergence to the bull side. Nothing concrete at the moment. So Amazon had decent earnings, but has pulled back a little bit with the rest of the market. Actually, Amazon's all over the shop, isn't it? Okay. Amazon could pull right back into the 186 level. Meta has had a bit of an all over the show type move on earnings as well. Good, and then pull back. Expect 551 ish, potentially even just a quick move down into 540, close some gaps. And then you want to see it breaking back above that trend line, I think. Ideally. Freak people out, close the gap, and then push back up. That'd be a pretty good retest. If these retests fail on some of these things, then you'd expect the economy is actually not going to really have the pump that we're expecting as well. So SMCI is still coming back. Geez, this stock's been hammered. People that went short at $50 would be happy. ASML, it's still coming back as well. So semis are getting hammered a little bit. Nvidia, not so much, not as much, but yes. Also started having a look at just a few of the bigger motor, like car companies, just to get an idea because they are a bit of a gauge on the economy. Stellantis kind of poorly managed at the moment as well, so it's kind of a mixture of both at the moment. But when you look at Ford's been pretty shit. But I think if we start to break to new lows on Ford, then the economy is probably not in a great way. It moved pretty early. And recovered pretty early too. Yeah, breaking to new lows on Ford would suggest we're going to have a bit of a market pullback, a bit more of a market pullback. There's a few things we can use to predict or to just get in front of a decent move. Ethereum's held up okay. Probably needs to find some support soon as well. But yeah, generally, Solana's pulled back a little bit more than Bitcoin, closing above that. Below that 13 EMA, which has actually held it up as well. That's not great. Solana might actually come back into 50, back into 157. 157 would be a good spot for Solana to actually pull back into. You kind of got a double W pattern going on if that happens. So basically, kind of been chopping like this, but this last one, pull back into this level and then move away would be pretty bullish. I think Solana, if the market does turn around once the election clears up, Solana would be a pretty good buy around the 157-ish mark. I might actually take a trade around there, to be honest. It's certainly sort of the middle of this range, and Solana's had a pretty good range for a while now. Like pulling back into this level here, which 154 is the middle of the range effectively. Probably a little bit higher than that, to be honest. This level here is probably there. 156.5, somewhere around there, which is around that 50 EMA. Pretty good level for Solana, I think. Which, if Solana hits that, what's Bitcoin going to do? It's probably going to do something similar, to be honest. Let's take a Bitcoin channel. Where should we do it? Yeah, do it there. I mean, the 50% of that actually comes into the high volume area around the 62.7. Don't think it'll get there. 318 levels actually 64.7, which would be more likely. Yeah, depends how you look at that, like where you draw that channel as well. So somewhere in there is definitely a possibility. Sorry, 318's, yeah, 6,700. Is it? No. It's 64,770. It could be a wild ride over the next few days. I'm just going to manage this hedge and basically manage it in profit. If it hits my stop loss on my hedge, then it's going to be profit anyway. And it would be at a point where you would be expecting a little bit of a turnaround to the upside on Bitcoin. And realistically, if we break below this, there's not a huge amount of targets until you do get down into that 64.5. Yeah, that's about it. Shorter time frames. Good turnaround here on the crown stochastic momentum there. So that's a pretty good sign. Could be a nice little just eke up, climb the wall of worry type scenario. I do get a little concerned where it's getting thin on these moves because I've seen this lead to a rollover quite a few times. But for the time being, is jewels to the upside. Yeah, momentum's to the upside. BBWP is expanding. Volatility is expanding. Anyway, could be a decent move. We still haven't come back down all the way into that 618 level. Obviously, we don't have to. We've sort of seemed to be basing in between the 69,500 and 68,600, which that's based on the bottom to top on that move. So it's just the fib levels. Yeah. Still not looking super healthy, but this isn't the worst move up. Kind of want to see it breaking that 50 EMA, which is at the same level as the 800 EMA on the 15-minute. So that's going to be a pretty key level, around 69,750. If we can break above and reconfirm that and move to the upside, then obviously you got the 200 EMA, which is coming in at 70.5. That'll be an issue as well. That's where there's a wick here. So there's some key levels on the way up. 69,750, 7,500. If we can sort of break and consolidate or confirm above them, then the bull market's back on. Otherwise, over the next few days, it's probably chop. Just be aware that in election years, Bitcoin typically bottoms in the first few days of November. So literally like Monday, Tuesday, if it's not bottoming by then, I'd be a little bit concerned. All right. That's about it, I think.